Hello and welcome to round 2 of the Eternal Tournament series for week 4. I am Truedawn, joined by LocoPojo, and we will be jumping into a game between IlyaK and Metaphors in just a moment.
Yeah, we have Ilya on Stone Scar Maulers, a deck after my own heart, and Metaphors on a Film Control list, which seems to have a lot of different one-ofs and Celestial Omen, along with a bunch of interesting things, including 2 Varas. I think it's going to be a really interesting late-game deck. Ilya starting off with a Quarry and a Vara's Favor, and Steward of the Past at 4, as well as that Argenport Instigator for a little bit of early pressure.
Yeah, this Argenport should be able to throw some pressure on Metaphors. It's hard for this, like, the Bloodcaster can block the Argenport, but it's really bad if IlyaK has a Torch or a Rapid Shot or anything. So Metaphors elects to not block there. He's going to be under some pressure from this, and we will see a Steward of the Past likely coming down next turn. Although IlyaK's version does not include as much burn as you would normally see. There are no Flame Blasts, no Obliterates. So Metaphors can be a little bit more liberal with his life total.
Yeah, the Instigators being permafrosted is an imperfect answer, since it does mean that IlyaK can pressure damage by killing Metaphor's units, but it also gives the Film deck a little bit of aggression as well. Basically, this Instigator is just going to be dealing damage left and right to both players, and we'll see exactly who ends up with more units slain and more advantage out of that option.
So this is IlyaK just deploying his all his threats, electing to go for the Argenport and the Statuary Maiden as opposed to the Umbran Reaper on this turn.
Yeah, Champion Cunning coming down very early for Metaphors. This is a pretty good setup for him. Umbran Reaper can be a blocker, and Stone Scar Maul is a pretty good answer to the 5/5. But if he doesn't get the Stone Scar Maul up soon, then that Champion will be pressuring for quite a bit of damage on Ilya.
It's interesting because the race is kind of close right now. The Umbran Reaper does definitely swing it pretty far in IlyaK's favor. But if Metaphors can enable the Shadow Threshold, the champion, which is granted is at least 2 turns away, it will allow him to do a lot of damage very quickly.
In addition, he's still got an Aegis Flyer, so he's feeling pretty happy about that result. Second Umbran Reaper on the draw from Ilya, which is definitely pretty good stuff. Metaphor is getting close to his 7th power. Can get some extra card advantage out of this, but I think it's more a matter of who kills who first at this point.
Metaphors does have 3 Stewards of the Past in his deck, and only 1 more Permafrost, so this Umbran Reaper can be answered without triggering the Entomb, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. It is either going to hit for 5 here or trade. It looks like it's just going to hit for 5. This is an interesting block. I'm not sure I want to take that much damage from the Umbran Reaper.
I don't think I agree with that block. It doesn't give Ilya any weapons because the Aegis from Champion of Cunning blocks the Statuary Maiden's effect, but he's still left with an Umbran Reaper on the field and a new champion coming down from Ilya. There's so much pressure here, and Metaphors may not actually have any good answers. Rain of Frogs comes down, but that's not enough. You just get a frog out of that and prevent him from having
and this
the
Suffocate
final finisher.
is going to be lethal, looks like, unless there is an Annihilate. Even then, yeah. We will be moving forwards to game 2. We'll see how the pillars address sideboard, but that was kind of just a steamroll on the part of IlyaK. It was just all these Stone Scar threats are so powerful, and unless you have the answers that line up perfectly, you're just going to get run over.
Yeah, it seemed like I think that perhaps that Champion of Cunning should have blocked the Umbran Reaper to just delay the game a little bit more, but Statuary Maiden is a pretty worrying threat over time, so it's something you do have to worry about eventually. Still, the Champion of Cunning wasn't going to give him a cudgel, so it seemed like stemming the bleeding might have worked out a little better for him. In any case, we're going to see the sideboards coming in. Ilya looking at various options. He's got plenty of Stone Scar Mauls and Smuggler stashes in here. Opting for the late game control could be exceptionally good, and he's also opting to throw in 2 Furnace Mages for the Staff of Stories.
He did take out the 4 Torches and 2 Annihilates, which makes sense. Torch you generally don't want in matchups where it's just going to be 3 damage to the face. That's not a powerful enough card. It needs to actually have legal targets or profitable targets to kill. And since there aren't any in this matchup, he's eschewing it for more powerful effects.
Yeah, and in the meantime, Suffocate is definitely a very powerful card in this matchup since it kills Black Sky Harbingers, it kills Withering Witches, and it kills Felon Bloodcasters, all of which are designed to dodge around most removal. And having a very, very cheap and easy way to dispense with those threats can really help you out against the Feln matchup.
I also like bringing the Furnaces Mages over the Ruins in this matchup because the Feln deck has so much removal that you need to have a high density of threats. And if you ever have the Ruin and they don't have the staff that's just sitting in your hand, you could just lose the game based upon having that one dead card. But Furnace Mage, and the worst case scenario, is always at least 4/3.
It's a matter of developing tempo versus quickly responding to threats. Ruin is a card that develops a little bit less and gives you a little bit less advantage, but it's better at dealing with fast relic weapons and things that can deal a lot of damage to you and create pressure. Furnace Mage, of course, is very, very good at dealing with things like Staff of Stories or Xenon Obelisk, where you can easily break something on your turn and deal with it at a reasonable pace, and then still have something on the board to show for it afterwards. So it's a pretty good play here, and it's definitely a good sideboard for Ilya.
And although we don't have the sideboard for Metaphors up, it's worth probably talking about his sideboard. He does have access to 3 Sabotage, 3 Lightning Storm, 2 Plague, 1 Rain Frogs, 1 Steward of the Past, 2 Champion of Cunning, 1 Stray, 1 Gift, and 1 Drake. The things that pop out to me immediately are pretty much just the Steward of the Past and maybe the Sabotages. His sideboard's a little light here. Champion of Cunning is also a reasonable option depending upon how proactive he wants to get.
Ilya throwing in one of those Ruins as well. I guess he wants a lot of attachment destruction. He opts for 3 Smuggler Stashes, which is a pretty good number if you're going to be playing against a control deck. Smuggler Stash is your big card advantage card, so it allows you to overplay and get like a bit of extra stuff against that. Now the Ruins and the Furnace Mages are coming out, so it looks like Ilya's making further changes to his sideboard. Might have to undo everything we said here.
I'm actually not sure. Like, I like the first mages because they're, worst case scenario, a like creature. You can still cast them and attack. But the Ruins seem a little bit ambitious for me because the only target is the Staff of Stories, and you're actually a deck that is very good at pressuring a weapon like that. So even in situations where you don't have a Ruin or a Furnace Mage, you could probably deal with the Staff of Stories.
Oh, yeah. Ilya just forgot to clone his deck, so the changes that he made are going to be the ones that he's electing to choose. He's just making a copy of his main deck so he doesn't mess it up. So
Makes
Furnace Mages, Ruins, the 3rd Smuggler Stash, we should have all of that coming in. And yeah, looks like it'll be a much more control-oriented setup.
And this is certainly the interesting upside of the way IlyaK has built the deck. The more aggressive builds of Stone Scar with Obliterate and Flame Blast are kind of pigeonholed into being the beatdown, whereas the way IlyaK has built it, you can pivot between being a deck that applies a lot of pressure and can kill your opponent very quickly, or bring in the appropriate disruption to slow the game down a bit and then deal with your opponent with your very proactive threats.
Yeah, it's always going to be an issue of like whether or not he gets the tempo cards. You do want to have those 2 and 3 drops, Instigator and Champion of Chaos, in your opening hands. If you don't get those, the Steward can do a decent amount of pressure on turn 4, but looks like what we're looking at here is a slower hand that will eventually have Charchain Flail, which is always a good card against control.
Yes, I'm certainly a big fan of Charchain Flail. Just the versatility of it is incredibly useful, and against the Feln deck, you're able to match it to whatever blocker they put up, usually something with 5 toughness. So it's a weapon that can always deal with one of their threats or one of their blockers, and they're generally hard to deal with.
Yeah, it's also a good card to be playing against Feln decks that are generally like high on those large threats in the late game and sometimes don't have any sort of early game defense. If you play a Charchain Flail down early, you often won't see a good answer to it because Feln decks will have their hands full of control tools like Eye of Winter and Annihilate and Suffocate. Looks like here we have Feln Bloodcaster to stand in the way, but Furnace Mage wrecking that Eye of Winter and immediately setting up for some early aggression.
We do see the first mage pay off there. I actually did miss the Eye of Winter in the deck list before, and that is definitely a great reason to bring in first mage. And Metaphors brought in Recurring Nightmare. It actually has one main deck, so you may have just left it in, but that's certainly an interesting plan in this game.
It's not a bad sideboard, especially if you predict that Ilya has brought out the torches. Ilya does have the Death Strike in hand, so he can hold on to that Death Strike for as long as he likes. I think here he's very clearly signaling that he has the Death Strike. So whether or not Metaphors decides to keep that Recurring Nightmare is going to be an interesting choice.
Yeah, this is an interesting dance between who is like how players use their mana. Like Metaphors is kind of forcing IlyaK to hold up some mana of removal to deal with the Recurring Nightmare. So that's bricking like 4 of IlyaK's mana, and Metaphors can then do whatever or pass or use instant speed spells like he did there with the Death Strike. So it forces this little dance. IlyaK does decide to let the Recurring Nightmare hit once more to get this Steward of the Past down. But he's going to need to deal with it at some point.
Metaphors has demonstrated that he's kind of afraid of the torch here, but IlyaK has shown that he doesn't have it. So the question here is going to be, what can IlyaK play that allows the Recurring Nightmare not to come down and still gives him some sort of tempo advantage and allows him to play out? At the moment, he's just seeing draws from Felon Bloodcaster, never a thing that you want to see. He's kind of stuck on the back foot. And
this is like the tempo black hole
playing into this Death Strike.
Yeah, this is the tempo black hole I was talking about, where like since IlyaK left up the 4 mana, Metaphors would just be like, okay, I'll Felon Bloodcast this turn, or like I'll do something that isn't Recurring Nightmare. And now that IlyaK has stepped out, he could Recurring Nightmare this turn, do something else. So the way he has used his mana this game has been incredibly efficient and essentially time blocked IlyaK several times.
Yeah, we're seeing some indecisiveness from IlyaK. He's finally moving into the tempo play after leaving the Death Strike up again, and once again, Metaphors just did not fall for it. So now the tempo is out, but it's a little bit late, and Metaphors has his own Champion of Chaos from the Felon Bloodcaster draw.
It will do a reasonable job of trading with the opposing Champion of Chaos, although the champion will get in the trample or overwhelm damage.
Yeah, all that deadly influence from Shadow being in the colors of Champion while stealing the Champion is definitely very helpful here. IlyaK can throw down Statuary Maiden and threaten a Torch, which may be enough to forestall the Recurring Nightmare. He can also opt for the Charchain Flail or the Umbran Reaper as an option, but he needs some sort of way to make sure that he doesn't get pressured out this game.
It's so awkward for IlyaK here because it's still the Recurring Nightmare is still there. He still needs to live with this Death Strike. He could play the Umbran Reaper threaten a block, which looks like the plan he's going to do. But like a removal spell here plus the Recurring Nightmare deals 8 damage and then puts the Recurring Nightmare at 16 power, which is lethal. So IlyaK just has to leave that Death Strike up forever.
We're seeing IlyaK play it very, very safe here. He doesn't attack with the Champion of Chaos, which I mean, I almost never see a fully loaded Champion of Chaos not attack, because that trade, of course, is still 4 damage in addition to trading with the champion.
And now he has to block here, which is just so bad.
Yeah. So he loses out on about 4 damage here, and there's just not very much pressure coming out of IlyaK. Instead, all of the pressure is on the Feln side, which isn't really how this is supposed to go. Typically, there's a turning point where the Feln deck can reassert control, but thus far, on account of Recurring Nightmare, on account of the threats that he's actually been playing, Metaphors has been pressuring IlyaK.
Yeah, and this is just all because of this Recurring Nightmare, and this Charchain Flail actually just takes up the whole turn, and the Recurring Nightmare is lethal. Like, the Recurring Nightmare is essentially what won the game, just tying up IlyaK's mana every turn, and his only answer was Death Strike, which was his whole turn whenever he would choose to do that. And whenever he left it up, Metaphors would just do something else with their mana. It was a very well played game by Metaphors, utilizing that Recurring Nightmare.
In a situation like that, you really have to sort of play against the Recurring Nightmare and try to outpace your opponent, and then like basically reserve the Death Strike or reserve your removal spell for later in the game when your opponent thinks that he has the game sealed up. That runs the risk of running into, of course, Backlash or some sort of like spell that protects the Recurring Nightmare, but the other option is to sit still and do nothing, and that does not work, especially when you're the aggro deck.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. And we do see IlyaK reactionarily putting in a couple torches. I do think he showed some cheaper answers to that Recurring Nightmare, especially based upon how he sees that game went.
Yeah, there's only one Recurring Nightmare in the main board, though, and none in the side. So that's 2 torches to deal with a single threat. That's pretty rough for IlyaK. It's going to be hard to see if those torches end up being useful in other places. Torches are a very flexible tool. You can use them with Flame Blasts, or IlyaK, of course, does not have Flame Blasts. them with Char Chain Flail to push like a little extra damage. They do present some useful 2-for-1s, and they're almost always a reasonable source of damage. So it's not bad to have those torches in there. It's just that they don't strictly answer a lot of Metaphors cards.
It's just insane. We see the value that Metaphors is getting from this. Just one copy of Recurring Nightmare's deck has just completely thrown off how IlyaK wants to sideboard for this game. Not only has the Recurring Nightmare won him a game, but even going into game 3, IlyaK's just like sitting here deep in the tank. Like, how do I sideboard how I normally want to sideboard, but not have what just happened happen again?
Yeah, I think the 2 torches are a reasonable compromise. You definitely don't want to go to 4. Having the Death Strikes is very, very useful. And I think Umbran Reaper, of course, is still a pretty good card. Any sort of flyers, any sort of general void hate is really, really useful. There are not Haunting Screams in this deck, are there? There are not. So that Recurring Nightmare is just a one-of threat that is forcing Ilya to make some tough decisions.
There is a Vara that could get it back if that ever comes up.
Yeah, double Varas can in fact get back the nightmares and get back all sorts of other scary, scary threats. That really seals up the late game for this Feln deck. I think that is a pretty solid choice for Metaphors, for making sure that he survives the late game and has that sort of push through. From here, we're seeing Ilya with a champion hand that he tosses back. We have Quarry and Torches and Sabotage. So right away, not a lot early on.
It was really interesting to see IlyaK mulligan that first hand. It was just 2 power and Argenport champion. It seemed like a pretty solid hand, but and with the 2 quarries to fix things from there.
Yeah, if you
seemed
can't
like pretty
get
ambitious mulligan.
If you can't get your 3rd power, it's definitely something like sort of scary. But I think if you can play Argenport onto, it's usually worth it to keep it in a mid-range deck. It depends on what your overall game plan is. And again, Ilya seems to be playing a sort of defensive game plan, which may not be as effective against this Feln deck.
Yeah, you generally don't want to engage the Feln deck on their terms. The game to stall out and have the Sappho Stories get value and like Vara and do all this powerful late game stuff. It's unclear that IlyaK can do that type of stuff better than Metaphors.
Yeah, the Argenport Instigator does come down, eats a Suffocate immediately, which is never good. If your opponent has Suffocate or Torch for Argenport Instigator, that's not only like a pretty significant loss in tempo because you are losing what is one of your only 2 drops, but it's also that 1 damage tends to be fairly meaningful, and that is the essential drawback of Instigator for large size. Not something that comes up terribly often, but every time it does, it actually does hurt.
And here we see the remnants of the Recurring Nightmare. These 2 torches that just do nothing essentially right now. There's no way they're going to trade profitably with anything on the board. Yeah, he could double torch this Champion of Cunning, and I guess it's dead, but like he just had to 2-for-1 himself, and there is the legacy of the Recurring Nightmare. That's a
And
huge
now
amount of
both
value.
torches are gone, so if a Recurring Nightmare does come down, there's not really an answer to it. Yeah, I think that like overall those torches just really, really bad for Ilya to have both of them in his hand. As a 2-of, you would expect him to see only one of them, and that can actually be useful, but nope, he ended up with both, and that is something that you have to account for. So the Umbran Reaper, 5 costs, will come down soon. That'll allow Ilya to swing tempo around a little bit and also continue to push. But with the 2nd Staff of Stories in the hand, that puts Ilya in a very tough position.
We'll have to see if Metaphors is a Steward of the Past or something to prevent this Entomb trigger, because as it stands, a normal removal spell would end up with the Staff of Stories getting destroyed.
Wow, he actually has the Steward. If he has a Suffocate as well, that's especially good, but just having the Steward is enough. So Ilya doesn't have the ability to cast his Stone Scar Mauls yet, but they are pretty useful. Oh, and a Lightning Strike. Okay, so there goes the Umbran Reaper. No Entomb and an extra draw for Metaphors. This game is getting rapidly close to being finished. I think Ilya will not see a game 3 or another game.
I think he can get there if he sees another power next turn. He could start getting these Stone Scar Balls to trade for things, and then he could play the Smuggler Stash and do it all over again. But he didn't get the power there. He has these 2 Smuggler Stash. He's probably going to have to fire one off just to get 2 creatures. And with the Steward of the Past in play, these don't have any words anymore. You see the Argenports have no more text. The Umbran Reaper is like 5-mana 5-1 with no abilities. So IlyaK is in a very bad spot.
He has a 3rd torch. I actually thought he only sighted in 2 of them, but no, it looks like yet another torch just sitting dead in his hand on account of that Recurring Nightmare. So that 1-of threat from Metaphors again, just really, really
completely changed the paradigm of the game. It was
We see Forbidden Lore possibly into an Azindil's Gift. That would be a very, very powerful card in this match. Other options would include Rain of Frogs, which definitely gets rid of the Stone Scar Mauls. And without those, the Smuggler Stashes are pretty well blanked. Sabotage gets rid of the
Jeez,
Smuggler
yeah,
Stash, and suddenly Ilya's hand is just awful.
yeah, this hand of like just completely anemic threats, like the frogs or the Argent ports. He's going. Metaphor is going to have a very easy time protecting the Staff of Stories, and the Staff of Stories should just run with the game.
Rain of Frogs is usually pretty card neutral, and since it gives the opponent a frog, it tends to be actually even disadvantageous. But if you hit two things in the hand at once, then not only do you reduce the chance of your opponent getting Destiny Frogs into better draws, you also basically blank two cards for one, which is a significant amount of advantage. From here, Ilya can double block the Steward and Torch, and that'll prevent silences, but that doesn't really prevent the
Oh,
main
never mind.
issues.
There's Stewart number 2, and I
Yep.
think the game's not about that anymore. Like he's just going to die to these 2-5 and the 3-5.
This is well over. Ilya's been pressured out. His strategy did not pay off. Definitely ended up with a more defensive style and didn't quite get the pressure cards that he really needed. There's no Flame Blasts or Burn or anything to end these Staff of Stories as threats, and without the attachment Destruction of Furnace Major Ruin in his hand, he's just going to see card after card drawn from Metaphors.
It's insane how this game is played out. If you look at Metaphor's life total, he's at 24. IlyaK has only done 1 damage to Metaphors, and I'm pretty sure that was Avara's favor. Like no creature ever got in.
You don't usually see Stone Scar decks behave like this. I think that it's very rare to see a Stone Scar deck not have some sort of aggression on the board. But I mean, it's a product partly of Ilya's main board. There's no Flame Blast. There's not like as many of the damage pressure threats as you would normally see. There's a lot of card advantage threats, such as the Statuary Maidens over the Stewards of the past, and like just generally sort of a more control oriented style. And against this other control deck, what we would say is maybe the larger control deck, it definitely does not work out very well.
Yeah, I'm incredibly impressed by both Metaphor's build of Feld and the way he played that matchup. I really like his diverse threat base. 1 Recurring Nightmare, 2 Champions of Con, the Varas to get like these individual things back. It was an incredibly impressive game by Metaphor. I'm actually interested to play his build of Feld later after the stream.
I would like another Celestial Omen in there since there's so many 1s and 2-ofs in the deck. But I do think that there's a pretty good balance of threats here. And of course, like some of those 1-ofs presented big enough threats that like the sideboards actually became fairly difficult for Ilya. Yeah, so that wraps up this game.
And we will be moving to our backup match between Redworld and Juaspas.
All right.
Just trying to check which game this is for you guys.
Let's
But right now, it looks like we're kind of at a stable board.
Let me open it up. I don't think I have it open here. Yeah, so.
Yeah, everything is pretty much at parity. We do see this Mystic Ascendant come down, start to accrue some advantage. This Umbran Reaper on the opposing side will present a bit of a clock, but Redworld is at a relatively safe 22, and the Valkyrie should deal with it later. This Protect will deal with the Death Strike, allowing this Mystic to stay around, which is likely going to matter quite a bit.
You have the BM emotes from Juaspas, and Valkyrie Enforcer is setting up. We're informed that this is, in fact, game 3, so this one's for all the marbles. Harsh Rule is available here. Redworld can choose to silence the Umbran Reaper first. He'll sacrifice the Valkyrie Enforcer as tempo, and he won't be able to use Seraph's ability if he does that. But on the other hand, Umbran Reaper is a pretty significant amount of pressure, so this might be something that he considers worth doing.
I'd be surprised if we didn't see the Valkyrie here. It looks like Redworld's in a very good spot to win the late game, both with this Mystic Ascendant and 2 Seraphs. The only way he loses is by this Umbran Reaper doing a bunch of damage. I think he's just going to take that out with the Valkyrie and then move forward to activate Seraphs in the following turns.
Yep. A second Seraph from Redworld. I'm not sure about Juaspas's deck composition, but it must be a lot of single target removal if we're seeing the second Seraph come down. Azindil's Gift is thrown. That means that Harsh Rule is going to be effectively blanked for this game, but Redworld has more than enough tempo to play if he needs to.
It'd be interesting to just know if Juaspas is playing Strain of Shadows into his deck. Let me actually check real quick.
It looks like he is not, at least not in the main board. There are two in the side, so it's possible that there are some in this particular game. So we have all of the pressure from Redworld, and of course Seraph activations if he wants them, but more likely he's just going to want to play these Parliaments and Valkyrie Enforcers and put as much pressure on the board as possible, rather than rely on that random card from Seraph being more powerful than the cards in his hand, because he'll be able to play those for quite some time.
It is an interesting choice because the Seraph activation likely gives you something that can survive Stray into Shadow. So you would lose the Parliament, but right now, if Juaspas does have Stray into Shadow, he wipes the board.
Yep, that would be a very scary bit of business. Strain to Shadows is definitely very effective at making sure that you get rid. Oh, and there it is. All of Redworld's board is gone, and Redworld is now top decking into a Zindel's Gift, which is really not where you want to be. Mystic Ascendant and Sandstorm Titan, like all of the big threats that Redworld can draw, do mean that he's not going to be too bothered by the fact that he has an Azindel's Gift on him, but he's still just like in top deck mode against a deck that has a couple more cards than him.
Although his top decks have lined up pretty well the past 2 turns, being able to deal with Juaspas's threats. We did see that the wombo combo of playing a Zendel's Gift and then forcing your opponent to play out their hand and then going into a sweeper work out there doesn't always work out, but that's the combo you want to set up.
Yeah, casting the Protect on yourself to prevent discarding it, but then immediately losing the Aegis because of the discard effect. Steward of the Past here, another Aegis popper that isn't necessarily popping any Aegis this time around, and a Seraph. So now Juaspas has to have some sort of actual removal for Seraph, or else there is going to be a series of increasingly relevant threats being pushed.
Although it would come at the opportunity cost of the Sandstorm Titan, so it's interesting to see them actually just snap activate here.
Oh, that hurts. Ageless Mentor buffs the Sandstorm Titan, and then it goes immediately into the Void from a Sindel's Gift. Not a very good Seraph, but the odds were actually in his favor to get something that was bigger than Sandstorm Titan, I believe.
I think it's like Sandstorm Titan is like pretty close to the median. It's actually it's got to be pretty close, I would imagine.
About the exact average. So we have Teriax. Hunting Teriax, that's what that one's called. The 6/10 ambush, much better as a 6/10 ambush than a 5/3, since it's no longer torchable and pretty hard to kill in general. Actually, I'm a big fan of Teriax as a like mid-range surprise card, and looks like this one's going to be pretty good in this particular matchup.
I'm pretty sure I would assume that Redworld plays the Valkyrie to silence the Sandstorm Titan, so his flyers can get through, but we do see him activate again. It's interesting to see him choose to activate Seraph in all these turns instead of the threats he drew. Like, the opportunity cost is real. Those threats aren't coming back, but neither was the activation. So I guess it's him assuming that the thing he would get off the activation is better than the card in his hand.
Yeah, and for the most part, that's generally going to be true stat-wise. The silence effect here is kind of useful on account of the fact that it deals so effectively with the Steward of the Past and make sure that you can actually trade in cards like your 6/10. But right now, Redworld has to decide if he wants to harsh rule the entire board, which seems like not that great an idea against Juaspa's 5 cards in hand. He'll offer a trade for the Steward. Get a Scorpion Wasp.
But then it ends up trading with a Wasp.
Yeah, that Scorpion Wasp is actually a pretty good like fish for Redworld. Like, he actually managed to get an extra card out of Juaspas' hand before casting Harsh Rule. So that does serve him in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. He was able to test the waters, see what happened after the attack, and then he could decide whether or not he wanted to Harsh Rule afterwards. Turned out the Harsh Rule was profitable, so it was a good order of operations by Redworld there.
Okay, we're at 10 out of 10 for Redworld, so nearing that 12 power spot where a Great Parliament becomes really difficult to deal with. Ends up getting 2 4/4s here, and that should be a pretty solid top deck for him.
Juaspas does have like actual creatures that deal with these in the form of Sandstorm Titans. So if he draws one of those, he doesn't have to use 2 removal spells to kill these owls, or he could have his second Strain to Shadow.
Indeed, yeah. Second Stray into Shadow would definitely be the best answer here. Instead, he uses a Scorpion Wasp and still taking damage from that 4/4. This is the real risk of playing a Zindel's Gift and other control-heavy stuff against the Combrade decks, is that basically every card that they have is a really big threat. So if you don't have enough pressure, then like you can still lose in this situation. I think Redworld's not especially favored at this point, but Juaspas is not drawing into anything better, or at least he hasn't played anything better yet.
Yeah, he will need to win the game at some point. See how he ends up going about that. But as you were talking about, Zendel's Gift is generally a bit underwhelming against the big combo decks, especially when it comes down to the point in the game where they have enough mana to pretty much cast everything in their deck. So all of their top decks, they can just throw into play at will.
If you can get it early while your opponent is still holding on to like 2 Mystic Ascendants and an Iron Thorn, then it's pretty special. But if you get it too late, and too late is usually almost as late as turn 7, but usually just a little bit later, then they will have like basically no cards in their hand anyways, and the only thing that you're going to get is those Harsh Rules and Vanquishes, which are cards that you definitely don't want your opponent to have.
And scanning Juaspas's deck list here, I do see that he has a Shadowlands Feaster and a Last Word to help close out the game. He does also have 4 Mystic Ascendants. I think he has gone through 2 that we have seen at least. So we'll see how many of those he has left.
Redworld getting a Find the Way. Find the Way does pull some power out of his deck. It makes his top deck chances a little bit better. Juaspas is now using Scorpion Wasps on things as small as Combrei Healer, which suggests that his hand is full of really maybe not all that useful cards. With the Find the Ways here, Redworld, of course, is going to be making sure that he just doesn't draw 2 other power that he doesn't need. And he's up to 12 now, so any more Great Parliaments are going to be just an additional 4 power worth of threats.
Yeah, that's probably his best top deck here. Even things like that would normally be good, like Mystic Ascendant, are actually a bit underwhelming in the face of the Zendel's Gift. So while Redworld does have a lot of potent things to top deck, I think they're down to 1 Seraph. Yeah, Mystic Ascendants aren't great. They probably have 2 Parliaments left, so they're kind of drawing a little bit thin.
Yeah, Juaspas, on the other hand, is also drawing pretty thin. I think he's mostly holding on to single target removal that isn't very useful here. And like he needs basically a finisher, but there's only one of them in the deck, and it's the Last Word. I guess Mystic Ascendant would be another option that could help him out quite a bit, but we just haven't seen any sort of big units yet.
Yeah, certainly. He does have also like the couple Sandstorm Titans and Steward of the Past that on this board state could potentially win the game. And we do see, well, that's an Amber Acolyte. That won't really present much pressure, but hopefully they can find something. We do see a Mystic Ascendant from the side of Redworld here, which isn't great this turn, but may be able to accrue some advantage moving forward. I doubt that.
I think it's pretty.
Juaspas doesn't have something to kill it.
Removal for this, yeah. There's got to be an Annihilate or something here. There's no way with that many cards in hand that Juaspas doesn't have single target removal for something. So he's still taking his beats from the Temple Scribes, which ends up being pretty scary. But as it goes, oh, there's a Seraph with an activation. That's 2 threats for Juaspas to deal with. Yep, anything that generates 2 threats against a single target removal deck can be really tough. And there's the Death Strike. That Clockroach, however, buffing all of the other Clockroaches in Redworld's deck. Important stuff.
A little bit of the more anemic options to get, but it is still a thing that Juaspas has to deal with. He is at 7. He has to kill this. So We'll see if he can.
Has to die. And there goes a Scorpion Wasp blocking the 4/4. Temple Scribe is getting close to pushing through for the win.
He wants to go coast to coast.
Play an Umbran Reaper or something along those lines to get some of this health back, because at this point he's at risk of being pressured out just by the smaller units.
You see another Mystic Ascendant, which is something that Juaspas has to deal with it, but he's sitting there with 7 cards in hand. I imagine 1 is able to deal with his Mystic Ascendant.
Yep, there's another Annihilate. He's still eyeing that Temple student, really wanting to deal with it. And he finally draws one of his finishers, which is the Mystic Ascendant. This card's big enough to block and will also get him more card advantage and more threats. It's something that Redworld basically immediately has to deal with, and we've already seen so many Harsh Rules and Vanquishes thrown out of his deck. He's checking the number now. 1, 2, 3 Vanquishes gone, 3 Harsh Rules gone, it looks like.
So he only has 1 more Vanquish in his deck.
Yeah, it's 1 and 1. And that thing's not getting any smaller. An 8/8 is definitely a pretty significant amount of pressure, and Redworld choosing not even to block just so that he can pressure with his Temple student. I like this play. It's pretty cheeky. Another Find the Way from Redworld is going to pull basically all of the remaining basic sigils out of his deck. There's 1 Justice Sigil left, and the rest is Seats and Banners. So Redworld's mostly going to be drawing threats from here on out, but he's flooded pretty hard at this point.
Yeah, Redworld's in just a very bad spot of needing to A, answer this Mystic Ascendant, and B, needing to present a threat to kill Juaspas. I can't imagine he's able to do both with Zendel's gift in play.
Yeah, needing is one thing, getting's another. 8-8 and a 10-10 there. And so now Juaspas can kill Redworld with even a Vara's favor, which I wouldn't be surprised if he has. It seems unlikely, I guess, since he hasn't dealt with the Temple Scribe yet. So 10 damage here, but now there's so many different ways that Juaspas can generate lethal.
Even if he doesn't have lethal this turn, it's unlikely he won't on the following turn via removing a blocker or having additional threat.
No Vanquish, instead one of the remaining banners for Redworld, so that will just wrap up that game.
Yeah, but that was a really interesting match there, very close. We saw the game essentially boil down to that Zendel's gift. While it was it's not necessarily bad moving into the late stages of the game, but it did force Redworld to put all of their hand in play, and then that board just lined up for Straight and Shadow, and it was able to remove everything. And then from that point, it was pretty academic for Juaspas to seal up the game with whatever cards they're able to find from that point.
Now, Zendel's gift ended up being 3-for-1, 4-for-1 card advantage at the very least. Forced a Harsh Rule discard, a Vanquish discard, a Protect discard. Basically just got a lot of stuff out of Redworld's hands that would have been useful against the Mystic Ascendant and would have been useful against the later stuff. Of course, Redworld did have a lot of possible ways to get out of those situations, but Juaspas held on to his removal, and even though he was taking a lot of hits from the smaller stuff, made sure that he had answers for all of the bigger stuff and all of the potential draws.
Yes, definitely. And it's also interesting to see Xena Control become a more prevalent part of the metagame after we saw Zooch do so well with it last week. People have, including myself, have been really intrigued by that list, tried to innovate on it, make their own builds, even splashing Primal at times. So it's cool to see new players like Xena Control become a more relevant part of the metagame.
Yeah, it's a very, very exciting time. So yeah, several very good games here. We've seen some good back and forth. I expect we'll be moving into round 3 soon enough, but pretty good set of games that we've seen thus far.
Yep.